Hello, hello, and welcome to another edition of The Sit Down. I'm your host, Nathan Bomber Brown, and with me tonight, hopefully, join in a short amount of order. That would be Jeff Fuller will be joining us. He's the mad scientist behind the numbers that we're going to be talking about tonight, specifically those brands, and we might as well call them brands because that's what they are anymore, that can cover 100% of both football and basketball. And here's Jeff right now. Hey, Jeff, how we doing?
Doing good, doing good. Can you hear me all right?
I can, yeah. I know I'm catching you on the hoof, so I hope everything's going well.
Yeah, going great. Apparently my video is not popping up.
Okay, well, if you want to work on that for a bit, I was just getting into the intro of the show anyway.
Sure.
So you're welcome to, if you need to, you can disconnect and come back. It's no problem.
Yeah, I might join on my phone and then
Okay.
mute, but keep this screen up because I think I can just share the screen for some of my stuff.
Right.
From my laptop here.
Yeah, we're definitely going to want to see your presentation. I think that's what's most important and what most people will be signing in for. So yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and take the time you need. So anyway, thanks for being here tonight. Tonight is a special show, but I'm sure there will be follow-up shows to come with it in the future. And then we're going to be talking about total value and what values mean to different schools and different conferences are different all around. So what BYU, for instance, Jeff and I's namesake, what they care about might be different than what a University of Utah, for that matter, of Ohio State University might value. And in the course of discussing those numbers, how many of those brands, how many of those school monikers can actually pay for 100% of both football and basketball? And I just muted your other one there, Jeff. So can you hear me? Let's see. I can't hear you. Let me unmute the other one. Try it again. Now I can't get to it because it's got you muted. I'm not. I unmuted you, so it's not me. You gotta love technology. Let's try again. Unmute Mike. Yeah, I tried. It's not letting me unmute you for some reason. Now, see, there we go. So what happened, Jeff, is I can't hear you on your phone, but when I unmute your laptop, we're getting reverb. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if maybe you need to mute on your end because you're not muted. Let me try this now. Now unmute yourself on your phone. Try that. Now talk. I can't hear you for some reason. So let's do this. Let me mute your phone and let's now unmute your.
It says I'm backstage on my phone.
Maybe you know what? That's my fault. I apologize. I forgot to click you. There you go.
All right. Now, how's that? You can see
better.
Me, but no reverb?
No reverb now. Yep. We got it all sorted.
Nice.
So what we're talking about tonight, so everybody knows, is how many brands and how many schools out there can actually represent a full 100% commitment in both football and basketball. And this is a conversation that Jeff and I have had for the last several months. This isn't something that we just thought up last night. We've been trying to come up with a formula that would show really what is most important for a university and how it's exhibited on their different sporting, and we're talking men's sports at this point, right, for football and basketball. So before we get started and really dive into the meat about your data, Jeff, why don't you tell everybody who you are and kind of give a background on why a lot of the stuff that you're going to go into has merit. Why is it something that you know anything about?
Yeah. So, Jeff Fuller, live in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, BYU grad, lived in Alabama most of the time since I graduated from BYU. For my day job, my real job, I'm a retinal surgeon, an ophthalmologist, and take care of eyes all day long, which I love doing. Great job. I hit the lottery on my job choice. But as you know, I've always loved college sports and college football. And my first game as a BYU student was at Miami, or excuse me, at in Provo against Miami, number one ranked Miami, when Ty Detmer sort of launched his Heisman campaign and won the Heisman that
Right.
year with that upset. So, rushing the field there, I've been hooked ever since. And I just love football, college football, and love college sports. And I also love data. I love doing research, have a little bit of a history of medical research, but sort of to fill that niche as I've gone a little more private practice, I just love to dig into numbers and data related to sports. I've always loved following box scores and uh, you know just love following numbers and data, and I just sort of eat up every piece of data I can find about college sports. Rankings, statistics, metrics, attendance, revenues, TV contracts, anything that has a number to it that might relate to, relevance and value. That's just something I've always been interested in, been following it for well over 15 years, and just not a professional in that space, but I think I've got a lot of background knowledge and a lot of time on my side that I've seen a lot of things happen, and feel like I have more knowledge than your average bear on those things.
And I would just say this, that as we got this channel started, Jeff was one of the key people that Ute and I used to help us really delve into the data-driven part of analytics with realignment as it comes the cost of doing business in college sports. And I've just always been he's Jeff's always been there for me, and I really want to thank him for spending any time that he does with us. But he doesn't just help us, he does radio call-in shows. He's helped other contributors on YouTube, and certainly the analytics primarily put around the context of how college sports works. That's where Jeff spends a lot of his time. A lot of the comparative analytics have come from, they came through the Big 12 realignment. Certainly, BYU being involved was a big part of that. And then through that research, then we sort of branched out into other things. And the thing we're going to be talking about tonight, what I think is really fantastic, and you can kind of preference or not preface, but to put this into a good starting context for everybody, Jeff, is not every school can afford to do every sport 100% through, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing that maybe goes under the radar. People talk about the revenue share, the NCAA settlement with that salary cap, or as some people have said, a salary floor for entry to big time,
Right.
top level, NIL, and getting the major recruits of that 22 million a year based on the NCAA settlement. Uh, but yeah, that's sort of the key factor there, is who can reach that level, and beyond that, where does the money come from? Are we in a little grace period, I guess you can say, before that settlement kicks in? It seems like there's a big rush. I think it's in June 16th, or sometime in June or
I
July,
think
that
it's August. I think it's
I was at
August is
August.
when
Okay.
that hits. Yeah.
But yeah, that once that kicks in, then apparently there's, assuming all this is finally settled and agreed upon, which I don't think is finalized.
Right.
That's when the clearinghouse, Deloitte and Touche sort of backed clearinghouse, is going to sort of be vetting these these NIL contracts that are outside the revenue share portion, that 22 million. That part's not going to be vetted. That's, they're pretty much saying that's what you owe your athletes on average if you're going to participate at the highest level of that. But if you want to go above and beyond that, say you have a top level, quarterback who is, a surefire five star, and just is the bee's knees. Everyone's excited to have him there. Is he going to be able to get national sponsorships? I think of, like, we just saw the McDonald's All American basketball game last night with AJ Devonsa, who BYU fans are excited about coming in, number one recruit. They're comparing him to Tracy McGrady, LeBron. Obviously the comparisons are probably a little overblown, but he has all the talent, and I mean he's got a Nike deal, he's got a Red Bull deal, he's got these huge deals that aren't those ones aren't through BYU, but he's
Right.
getting a lot of funding from BYU, uh, from BYU boosters. The initial reports, according to Matt Norlander with CBS Sports, were that other schools were willing to meet sort of his NIL number of 5 million. That North Carolina and Alabama, especially, were there willing to meet that. And But there's also ESPN reports that BYU, quote unquote, wouldn't be outbid for him. And so, there are reports that it may have gone higher than that. I've heard some. It seems like people keep inflating the number. I've heard 7 million. I've heard 9 million. I don't think I believe those.
No.
Those are probably counting the Nike deal and the Red Bull deal
Right.
as total NIL income that he'll have. But yeah, that's just an example of how you can spend above and beyond this 22 million.
And I think it's really important for everybody to continue to distinguish the difference between the revenue share, which is the 20.5 million, and any NIL cap number that is, so everybody knows Deloitte and Touche they're counting. They're not putting a limit on anybody at this point. They're just beginning to build the data required to come up with a clearinghouse number, and every position, I assume, in every sport will receive a value assessed to it, and who knows whether that number will be something that will be held to, or if people will continue to spend and spend and spend until somebody says no, right?
Absolutely. And that's the interesting thing. I think Ross Dellinger had an article within the last week or two about a couple things related to that. Some of the basketball schools, I think Duke's athletic director was sort of complaining that, hey, you got all these big East schools or a school like Gonzaga who they can spend 22 million and they can put, they don't have football teams, some of these big
Right.
East schools and Gonzaga. They're going to put, okay, are they going to be outbidding Duke and North Carolina and these other schools, like, putting 15 million of their 20.5 million into basketball, and are they going to be untouchable from that revenue share portion? Because Duke and North Carolina, they have to commit to football as well, which is a lot more athletes, and by all reports is supposed to be at least 70-75% of all the NIL money will be, on average, will be going to college football, and
Right.
with the majority that's not there going to men's basketball. Obviously, different schools are going to split that up differently. Duke may do 40% of theirs to men's basketball and 35% to football, and the balance to the other sports. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all that factors in, and how different schools prioritize it. A school like Minnesota, they love their college hockey. Are they going to spend
Right.
5 million on college hockey, and therefore be a little poorer when it comes to basketball and football? Um, you know, uh, hard to think that much money would go there, but if they're able to get NHL quality athletes to stay at their college that long, and win national champions, they have a strong fan base. They bring in a lot of fans to their games. They make money on and they take pride in their hockey teams, both men's and women's, especially men's. You think of SEC schools with baseball, a school like
Right.
Vanderbilt, LSU, lots of Southern schools, whether they're mostly SEC but also ACC schools. People love college baseball down here, and those are some major professional athletes that are looking at big contracts in their futures. Are they going to spend to be at the top level of baseball, and therefore have less to spend for the other sports?
Yeah, very, very fair questions. Really quick before we jump into the meat of not only those questions but answers, I want to make sure everybody follows Jeff on YouTube. Sorry, on Twitter. Make sure you follow me, of course. Subscribe on YouTube. Turn on your notifications so you know when Jeff posts stuff. Certainly, as we do things around here at the College Football Mafia Network, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Turn on those notifications on YouTube and Twitter, and consider becoming a member of the College Football Mafia family. We cover everything wall to wall here. If it has to do with college football or college basketball, that's something we do. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. If you're watching on Twitter, make sure you jump over on YouTube, give us a subscription. We're pushing to 5,000 subscriptions by the end of the summer. So I hope everybody will help us continue to build on that. And yeah, this is one story out of hundreds that we cover in the off season, and just one of many things that I think we need to consider, that the business of college sports doesn't end at the end of the off season, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's year round, whether it's realignment, whether it's, the in the off season and the recruiting and the portal and, raising donations. If it's, there's all kinds of things going on behind the scenes, and there's always something that there doesn't seem like there really is an off season when it comes to college sports news, at least.
I don't think there is either. Okay. I think that's enough of the setup. I want to let everybody know, if you want your comment to be read a little bit later in the show, it'll have to be a super chat today. We generally do that when I do interviews with sports insiders, which is Jeff is definitely one of those. So if you want your question to be read as we address these different things associated with the business of college sports, it'll have to be a super chat. Other than that, I'll try to get to as many of the member chat and regular chats as I can. But today we're here to learn, and that's something that I think is really important. And if you want your question to be read, it'll have to be a super chat, guaranteed. Other than that, I'll try to get to as many as I can after we're done with Jeff's presentation. Okay, Jeff. So I put this question to you months ago, and it was something that you've been working on. You've toyed around. You've certainly talked to industry insiders, and you have friends that are sort of on the inside of how some of these universities go about assessing their value. Um, First, how did you approach the question of how many universities can be top tier in both football and basketball? And second, once you came up with really what you thought that needed to look like, how did you begin to take the information you have public access to start to put together a general picture of what I've always said is 30 to 40 schools that can compete top tier, top shelf in both football and basketball? That number might not even be that high, but the challenge is, how did you get there, and kind of what do you think about the problem that is in modern day athletic departments? If I still have Jeff. Jeff, you there?
I'm here. Sorry, I lost it for a second. I,
That's okay.
I missed the tail end of that question or that setup.
I was just saying, how did you get to where you have enough information that you could present something? What is the number you think of number of universities that could say, walk into a room and say, make a declaration, we do compete at 100% in both football and basketball funding?
Yeah, I think there's, probably 10 to 15 schools that are, they've proven they have the will and the money and the fan base and the donation support that they can do whatever they want. We're talking about your blue bloods in football, your Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia. These are schools that have the resources and have just crazy passionate fans that are going to go to whatever extremes they need to stay at that top level. The there are two different things here. There's, are you capable of doing it, and number two, are you willing to do it?
Right.
Think of a school like Stanford, where there are rumors that their sports dedicated endowment is well over $1 billion. Um, and or high into the 600 to 800 million dollars. I've seen different speculation there of this is just money that's sitting there to support their athletes, and it's earning so much interest every year. But there seems to be it's viewed as our athletes aren't that much more special than our regular students. We don't want to make our regular students feel like second class citizens. We don't, we think it's unbecoming to bring in students who wouldn't normally, be here at this school. They really don't utilize the transfer portal. So Stanford's an example of a school that has the resources and could commit at the highest level, but they really haven't proven from an institutional standpoint that they've been willing to, at least recently. Now things may be changing with bringing
Right.
Andrew Luck in as a general manager, and apparently there's been a change in their I forget if it's athletic director or their school president, but there's thought to be more buy-in and more will to do that. So those are
So a
sort of the two
philosoph
things. Do you have the capability, and do you have the will?
I was just going to say a philosophical
Go ahead.
challenge, right? Oh, did we lose you again?
Maybe a Virginia.
Okay.
I'm here.
Yeah,
Even a
I don't
school
know.
like Virginia,
We're
even a
you're
school.
cutting in and out, Jeff. So I'm every once in a while you'll see me ask you that question.
Sure. I'm sorry. I apologize if it's not the best signal. It seems like I should have a good signal here, but I think of a school like Virginia, like Georgia Tech, even North Carolina, which has a passionate basketball fan base. Some of these schools that sort of view themselves as public Ivies. The
Right.
public Ivy schools. There's almost it's they don't want to make the rest of their academic class there's a lot of pushback at some of these super high research institutions that it's just unwise, or it's unbecoming to fund sports at that level, and that they need to be the ones who are really supported and touted, and because they're bringing in all the research money. Why are we throwing all this money over to the athletes and the coaches when they're the real ones, the academicians who are sustaining the university? And I think they don't always realize that, hey, these sports are industries. They're bringing in
Right.
lots of, it's like they say, it's the front porch of the university. Their brands are built by being on TV, by having success, and the money they generate in donations and in ticket sales. It's there's a lot going on there. But I don't know if you want to jump into if you want to share the screen on my other the
Yeah,
black
yeah.
screen there.
You bring up whatever you want down at the bottom, hit the present,
Let's see here.
and then you can share whatever you want to from that. You bring it up and I'll share it.
I don't know why I can't find that window. Hold on a second. Of course, it's
So if you're looking
always,
at the main window, you're down at the bottom, should be a present tab.
yeah. I have so many tabs open. Sort of the story of my life that
That's all right. So if you look at the StreamYard window, down at
there
the
we
bottom
go.
you
I
should see a
finally
mute.
I finally found the
Okay.
StreamYard window. Okay,
Okay.
present.
Then you hit
Share
present.
screen.
You bring it up, and then I'll bring it up on the window.
Entire screen.
Whatever you want to show, whether it's an app or there you go. Okay.
So now you can see my whole
There we
screen.
go. Now we can see it. There
Okay.
you are. You're sharing.
All right. So there's this interesting site called nil.ncaa.com/power5.
Okay.
And I just was, obviously there's lots of numbers you can dig into. You can dig into ticket sales, you can dig into total donations. You can even just look at, recruiting rankings in the NIL era. That is somewhat reflective of who has the biggest NIL packages. Um, and so this website here And here it talks about, looking at all these power conferences. There's a link here that says to look at the methodology. And so I click over to that, and
Can you
pretty
share
much,
this link in the comment section, Jeff? Can you share links so everybody has access
yeah,
to it?
let me,
You
so I'd
wouldn't
have to
mind?
pull up the YouTube or just through StreamYard.
Just do it right through StreamYard. Yeah.
Okay.
Over on the right
Dang,
side,
you're
you'll see the
asking me to
comment section.
multitask all these different tabs here.
I know you can do it.
Is that the
I
chat?
know you can
I
do it.
put
Yeah, right
that's
there. That down, yeah, in the chat. Just copy
that
the
says
link and post it right
private
there.
chat. Okay, let me join the chat. Oh, now it wants me to connect through YouTube. Oh boy, I gotta sign in. You can tell how much I
Uh,
use StreamYard, huh?
that's yeah, it should pop up. I don't. And this
Well,
is
I
more
wasn't.
comment.
I
If
haven't
it won't
signed it.
work, yeah. If it
Okay,
doesn't work,
this will
then don't
work.
worry about it. Okay.
See if that worked right there. This comment has failed to post. I don't know why.
If it doesn't work, all right, don't
Hmm.
worry about it, Jeff. I'll copy it in later.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I shared it in private chat, and I think it worked there. If you want to
Oh, I
copy
see
and
it. Yep,
paste
I
it
got it.
in.
I'll share that. Go
I don't
ahead.
know why it won't let me share publicly, but so this is this looks at sort of conferences as a whole, but then it breaks it down into these different schools, and what they are assuming is the baseline collective funding that these schools can sort of come up with without even without really digging any deeper than they already are. And
Okay.
this mainly looks at, again, their methodology here. If you scroll down here, that's not the right thing. Okay, yeah. So see here, ticket sales and contributions. They sort of use those two numbers, and
Okay.
they do a few other things with this to look into it. But just in general, they look at all the Power Five schools here, and they look at these different things, the number of schools, and then look at this average per collective that they think that if you put in all the Power Five schools, on average, about $10 million is pretty much there waiting to be had, or is low hanging fruit that they really shouldn't have to work
Okay.
to raise. Okay, they don't have to, and that obviously the Ohio States and the Notre Dames are going to be way at the top of that, and the Texas and Michigans, and your Cincinnati's and your Wake Forest and your I don't want to disparage any schools, but there are obviously some others, Boston College, even maybe Northwestern, where
Okay.
they may have plenty of wealthy donors and alumni, but do they have do they have the support, the institutional support to bring it home? So just in
Okay.
general, they're saying the average Power Five school has about 6 times more per collective than the average group of five schools. And look at what a big ask they're saying this would be for the average group of five school. This 1.4, almost 1.5 million per collective. What are we saying is the cap of the collectives is 20.5 or almost 21 million.
Well,
That's a
not
big,
the collectives. That's the revenue share number from the university. The
yeah,
collective
but
doesn't technically have a cap right now.
well, I agree. So so money can be generated more, but again, this is where that 20.5 million, they're hope, that these institutions have their academic budgets and their, excuse me, their
Right.
athletic budgets. And so
Right.
they're trying to find this 20.5 million.
Oh, I see what you're
And they're
saying.
saying the
Yeah,
average group of five school only has about 1.5 million available
I gotcha.
to fund yearly from their collective. So this
Okay.
this would be the yearly generated by the collective. So again, yeah, I know they're not the same thing, but their revenue share has to be funded from the collective.
No, you're
Uh,
right. Yeah,
like
I
it could
understand what
it
you're
could be
saying.
it could be funded from anywhere. Money's fungible, and they could bring money from the school's general fund, and they could increase student fees, and they can do all kinds of things to generate more money. But
Right.
how will that be met at most of these institutions? Are we charging each student an extra $2,000 a year in tuition so that 40 guys can get $1 million each. It's sort of, these are the questions that are going to be had in this new
Right.
model. But so this is just looking at the average per school. And I'm going to go back to this tab here where it talks about the different conferences. Okay.
Okay.
And if you look, there's sort of a they still have the Pac-12 in here. They sort of stretch it from 2023 to 2024. Um, but and I think this is just 2024 numbers here that are listed.
Okay.
Um, or it does have 2023 and 2024 numbers. You can see the big change there in the Pac-12, where it's down to just two schools with Oregon State and Washington State. Again, this is prior to all that Mountain West breaking up or realignment into the Pac-12. But essentially, according to their figures, look at where sort of the ACC, the Big 12, and the Big 10, they're all in the same ballpark. We're talking. Big 12 is maybe a little behind, but again, you're looking at these the collective fundings there from ticket sales and from some revenue and from donors. You've got schools like Houston, like Cincinnati, like UCF, who are sort of new to the game, and their numbers that are showing up for these things are from their group of 5 days and their group of five conferences. So
Right.
do those numbers get boosted up a little bit as those schools start to get full shares in at the power level? But again, the SEC stands out at about 14 million per school, and that's head and shoulders. I mean, the gap between the Big Ten and the SEC, according to them, is larger than the gap between the Big Ten and the Big 12, which I
Right.
found sort of interesting. And again, maybe that will change with the new media deals and the larger borderline super conferences that the Big Ten and the SEC are becoming. I assume that gap would grow. Part of that media money may be what allows a lot of Big Ten and SEC schools to even up their game even more in the NIL and the in the revenue share portion. So that just looks at the conferences, but then this is probably what everyone's interested in. Where is my school? And also sort of, and again, this is just public universities. Okay, so obviously, maybe slot in Notre Dame here in the top,
Right.
four to eight. Slot in, you know, um, Stanford again probably has a lot of money available, but will they be willing to spend it? But again, these are your usual suspects: Texas, Ohio State, LSU, Georgia, Texas A&M. Again, they sort of stand out. A&M is the ones who spend like crazy and have been for a long time, but just are never breaking through to the championship level. Have never made the playoff. I don't believe they've won an SEC championship since they joined in football. Um, Again, there's a rabid fan base that has a lot of money, but for whatever reason, whether it's recruiting the wrong people or the wrong coaches or bad luck, they haven't broken through with the success. But again,
Right.
schools like Florida, Clemson sort of sticks out as the one at the top of the ACC and in the top 10 of public schools overall, and above Oklahoma. That sort of surprised me a little bit. I would think Penn State would be a little higher, but maybe that's recency bias with their playoff success.
Yeah.
Indiana,
Indiana is
yeah,
interesting, isn't it?
it is. So Indiana's numbers, when I look back through their individual, they had a year that was a huge outlier. I think they got is it I think a 40 or an $80 million donation from
Oh.
like an angel donor that really boosted their numbers one of the years, and they were one of the top revenue schools either
Okay.
last year or the year before in the reporting. But again, they're one of those schools that's primarily a basketball school. Michigan State could be said as maybe a little bit more of a basketball school than a football school. Virginia definitely a basketball school over football. But again, based on they're looking at donations, they're looking at ticket sales. These are the schools that stand out. Oregon seemed a little low to me here. I
Right.
think I think Wisconsin here. It doesn't have the numbers, but I think Wisconsin was at 25, And so I think if you're in the top 25, definitely the top 20 here, you're like in that group where you probably have the wherewithal to be among these top 30 schools that can be at the top of both basketball and football.
Okay.
Looking down here, below Wisconsin are the bottom 25, with Houston being the lowest, Oregon State, Washington State, Central Florida, Rutgers. You got two Big Ten schools here, Maryland and Rutgers. That's got to be a red flag to them. You've got Cal here below Cincinnati. You got Georgia Tech, which has loads of money. They have one of the largest athletic
Right.
dedicated endowments, but again, they don't sell a lot of tickets, and they just haven't shown to recruit at the highest levels. Um, and again, so I think if you're in the bottom 20 here, 20 25, I'll scroll down, maybe cut it off around Nebraska, North Carolina, Mississippi, Wisconsin, that top 30-ish. You're probably in the game for being among those schools. If you're below that, there maybe we have to look, and maybe we can get you up into that group if there's something else that's developed since then. Texas Tech here stands out. They're around, I think, 35th out of the public schools on this list. Um, but what's happened over the last year with Texas Tech, which is after this data, they've
Right.
had They've had major facility renovations. They've made a big spend on football transfer portal, and they're, I think, in the top two or three in the overall football transfer portal. They're making a large commitment to that. I think of a school like SMU. They don't show up on here, but they have some big donors. And big enough donors that they said, "Hey, ACC, just let us in, and you don't have to pay us any media money, or part of the ESPN contract at least. You don't have to pay us that ESPN tier one media money for, was it 7 or 8 years, something crazy." They were just going to self fund, and they pop up occasionally in like the top 20 biggest NIL collectives in some of the lists I've seen. But you know, uh, there's a lot of Big 12 schools sort of in this sort of 30-ish to 45-ish
Hmm.
group here, and that it's going to be a tougher task for them to go there. I mentioned SMU. Let me share something from my screen here. So, I brought up AJ DeBansa, and we're BYU fans. Obviously, we're gonna go ahead and share
Sure.
where BYU might jump into this crew. They're a private school, so their number's not listed there. But
Right.
you know, AJ, that BYU paid a lot. But that from this article by Myron Metcalf from about a month ago, he talks about sort of the BYU boosters and how they're going all in on men's basketball, at least. But
Right.
there's this quote here that I've highlighted. It says, well, I'll just read this whole part. A fervent, lucrative group of supporters are willing to pay to find out, and their efforts started with signing arguably more to their long-term trajectory than top prospect, a new head coach. So it talks about all the money they brought in to fund Kevin Young and
Right.
pay him top dollar. And he came in and he gave a PowerPoint, and at this restaurant, it says that the wealthiest boosters were there, where the net worth exceeded $10 billion. And we see a lot of people saying, "Oh, Ryan Smith is just paying for every BYU basketball person that they could want." From,
Right.
from what I'm hearing and what I understand, he is not even close to the majority of this money that and he's said himself that none of his donations went to bring in AJ DeBonsa. Again, these collectives are fungible, and maybe he was bringing in,
Right.
maybe his donations went to bring in Kevin Young, and others went to bring in AJ DeBonsa. But a lot of people in Utah, especially Utah fans, have been sort of freaking out and saying they're not going to support the Jazz or the
Right.
the Utah Hockey Club, because they feel like their money is going to support, you know, to support Ryan Smith, who's a big BYU supporter, and that'll boost BYU's collectives and such. So just interesting stuff there. Now, basketball is a little different animal. There's a lot of evidence in football that the better your recruiting class, the better, uh, uh, the better chance you'll have to make the playoff, whether it's a 4 or 12 team playoff, and the better chance you have to win it.
Okay.
Ohio State's always in the top five recruiting, and but if you look at, you know, weird things happen in single elimination tournaments, especially larger ones like March Madness. But if you look at, these are the average recruiting rankings of the 4 previous years to the college basketball champions from 2011 to 2021, and there only one top 10 average recruiting team actually won the national title over that 10-year or 11-year period. I guess it's 10-year, excluding the COVID year where there was no champion. But that's sort of interesting. Kentucky was number one 4 years in a row in recruiting, and
Right.
they had that championship for that year. But all the other ones, yeah, you see some 10, 12, a 13. I guess Duke would have been number four if you exclude this one year. Um, but it's just sort of interesting that it doesn't seem that you have to have consistently the highest class in college basketball to win the championship, which makes
So,
sense. It's a smaller sport, fewer athletes.
do you see a
Go ahead.
one-to-one relationship between fully funding your, and we're just going to only talk about the two that really matter, and that's basketball and football, funding them to your max ability and championship quality teams? In other words, let's say, well, let's go back 4 years ago. Who won the national championship 4 years ago? In that same year, whoever won it 4 years ago, were they even in the Sweet 16 the following year in basketball? Things like this. Are you seeing one-to-one relationships between those two things,
Yeah.
or are they usually very unique and different?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a strong correlation between consistently strong recruiting and advancing in the tournament. Getting to the Sweet 16, to the Elite Eight, even the Final Four,
Right,
winning all the way through to be the champion. Takes both high level talent and some level of luck. And you just have to be on the right times, usually the right days. It's just it's harder, in my opinion, to win March Madness tournament, just because it's uh, you know the Super Bowl and all the NFL playoffs, those are single games. And in football,
right,
you have so many athletes that usually the better team wins. Basketball, they play, 5 or 7 game series in the playoffs to really see who the best team is. And in those series, the best team almost always wins. But
right.
if you're just to play a 1 game series, yeah, someone could be on fire. But Alabama, that's my second favorite team. It was an ironic weekend for me, but
Yeah,
we
that
sort of
was not
joked that
good,
Alabama
Jeff.
had three. Yeah, Alabama had three Jimmers playing for them. There were three
Yeah, that
Alabama
was
players. I
crazy.
think it was Holloway, Phylon, and obviously
Right.
Mark Sears, who all had six or more 3 pointers.
That's
And it was just
insane.
they just set records. And
Yeah,
there's just some randomness to the game. And the next game, none of them could hit. I think they only hit 8 threes compared to 25 threes against BYU. And part of
so
part of
it
that is obviously defense, but part of it is luck as well.
I was just going to say, I think in the last 5 years, Connecticut has been one of those tip top basketball brands. Obviously, they let football go fallow. That hasn't hurt their overall athletic output, but certainly going all in on basketball, which in general would be a cheaper expense in the overall, much less of a payroll than you have on a football team. Um, do you think that's going to be more the rule or the exception moving forward? Because it's extremely difficult, if not nigh impossible, to be elite in both, isn't it?
Yeah, and so I agree. And sort of what I mentioned before about the Big East and Gonzaga and a few other schools that will commit so much to basketball. Does that, I think schools like Ohio State and Alabama, Ohio State's, a football school, and Michigan can maybe do both. Alabama, the last few years has proven a commitment to both, but as their basketball's risen, has their, has the football fallen a little bit? Yeah, it's an interesting balancing act because as far as the media contracts go, they say 75% or so is related or of the earned money is from football, and about 20 to 25% is from men's basketball, and maybe 5% from everything else. So your media values all in football, or, three-quarters from football. Is that where you're going to put all your NIL, or some schools going to say, we can do a little arbitrage here. We can, let's boost our basketball and just do our best with football because of the visibility and the brand that we get. Our fan base cares more about it. That's where we get more of our money from ticket sales. But even a place like Kansas, which has a large stadium, and North Carolina, they have large arenas, tons of fans, super expensive, and Duke, super expensive tickets. And nearly, according to reports, nearly all those schools have much more money from football ticket sales than from basketball
Right.
ticket sales. I may be incorrect on a few of those, but I think at the power level, it's hard to find a place where they're making more in ticket sales from basketball than from football.
I can't think of one that would be that way. We have a question here from Fergie F18 Buffs. He $10 super chat. Thank you, Fergie. Appreciate that. We
Yeah, thanks.
appreciate the $10. It helps us keep the lights on. He says Jeff, Colorado is vexed about football greatness versus basketball competitiveness, and you would agree that our football investment is well worth it, but men's basketball is a challenge. Not sure what we will do.
That just encapsulates sort of what we were just talking about perfectly. Where you have to be in on football to fill the stadium, to bring the donations in, and there's a lot more money available for making the playoffs than for making March Madness. So yeah, that's the question that athletic directors, that these general managers, that all the all the accountants that work in these departments, athletic departments, are going to have to figure out how, where do we spend our money? Or where do we spend this revenue share portion, and how do we get outside money to get real NIL deals for some of these top athletes that we want to bring in. You speak of Colorado, you had Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter there. Those are guys who obviously demanded, real NIL deals, national level NIL deals that would have been above and beyond this revenue share. But, a school like Colorado, Prime has brought interest and ticket sales and boosted everything. Before that came in, Colorado is probably a school that may not, may not have been able to raise that kind of money and to be at the full $20.5 million to
Right.
be at that level, at that cap, but which I propose and others have proposed is really a floor of entry to the
Right.
top level. And schools that are in the SEC and Big Ten, as I mentioned, they have those bigger budgets because of the media deals, and they're going to be more likely. So here's this isn't completely fleshed out, and I've left a few schools out. I didn't finish this list completely, but this sort of the top tier here
I
of
love it.
these are pretty much your football blue bloods. Okay, except some people list Nebraska as a blue blood in football based on their all their championships.
Oregon's not a blue
They've
blood
haven't been.
in football yet.
Yeah, exactly. They're not a blue blood in football, but with Phil Knight money and with recent success and the level they've been recruiting and their
May get
coaching
there.
talent, in football,
Yeah.
you'd have to say that they're at the top level of
They're
having
certainly
the
aspiring.
financial for
Yeah.
yeah, and they have the financial resource. Yeah, and I know didn't you grow up in Oregon or Washington, or you grew up
I
in
grew up in
Washington? That's why you hate
Washington.
Oregon.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of
Yeah,
reasons to hate
yeah,
Oregon.
I know. Yeah, yeah. Oregon, I agree. I mean, they were almost irrelevant for forever up until I think it was the late '90s or something.
Yeah, let's not get
And
sidetracked
yep.
in that because I'll
Okay.
get on it.
Okay.
I'll get on a bender, and I don't want to do that tonight. So keep going. We're very everybody wants to hear your past Oregon down to your borderline schools.
Yeah, and again, these are schools that OU is a traditional, Oklahoma traditional blue blood,
Mm-hmm.
but with the move to the SEC and with recent, again, some of this may be recency bias that maybe we'd flip Oregon and OU and maybe put Tennessee in that top tier with some of the recency, that they've had. LSU, Nebraska, all these schools, I think, have proven that they have passionate fan bases and can raise money and can get top level recruits and coaches. Um, but again, we're talking more football here. I think of a school like Ohio State, USC, Notre Dame. I think the money's there that if there's the will, they can compete in whatever sport they want.
Right.
Texas obviously maybe should be at the top of this list. This isn't ordered in relevancy. This is just who is in that top tier,
Right.
Michigan, Texas, et cetera. But I think of a school like LSU where I think most LSU fans would, they want football to be funded at the highest level before a single dollar goes to any other sport. That's how much they care
Right.
about football there. Um,
Yeah.
I think of a school like Auburn in Tennessee. They've been up and down in football. Tennessee more up lately in football, and Auburn more down more recently in football, but both at the top and elite level in basketball.
Yep.
Miami, just lots of money. Penn State, large fan bases. I think these are the schools that sort of stand out as these are definitely among your top 30, top 20, top 30 schools that we don't even have to think about. That if they want to, they can fund their athletes in both basketball and football at the highest level.
Okay.
I say the next tier are some of these schools, and this wasn't completely fleshed out. I think this is where we put like maybe with recency bias, uh, some other schools that have been, I think I put the newer money NIL schools, BYU, Texas, SMU that we sort of talked about before. Down
Right.
below, here they have the money, will they spend it? Some of your more academic elite schools. And I really wonder about a school like North Carolina. They brought in Bill Belichick. They're showing they're committed to football. They've had some good football teams, but they've never really broken through at that elite level in recent history. And is that because they're so focused on being, a basketball blue blood?
Right.
And you think of the four true blue bloods in basketball historically, and they're not just blue bloods; they're all blue schools: Kentucky, North Carolina, Kansas, and Kentucky. Um, and you know, does their commitment to basketball does that hurt them when getting top level football recruits, top level football coaches?
Right.
Do those people want to go there and play and coach at a school where, reportedly that's why Bear Bryant left Kentucky because I think both he and Adolph Rupp won either conference championships or maybe it was even national championships the same year. And Bear Bryant got a watch and Adolph Rupp got a car. And
Oh,
Bear Bryant
wow.
saw the writing on the wall. Yeah, Bear Bryant saw the writing on the wall saw the writing on the wall, and it wasn't long before he was. That's at least the story that my father-in-law tells me. Again, maybe that's folklore, but that's the story I've heard. Um, but yeah, does being a top level basketball school, maybe like UConn, does that hurt their ability to
Yeah.
really commit to football, and does that keep them out of this top 30? I think North Carolina, there's enough money and enough brand and enough donors to get them up there. Old Miss is a school that's been really good at both and has a strong fan base, even though it's a rather small state. TCU, they brought in some great recruiting classes, a lot of money flowing through that alumni base. UCLA is sort of maybe more a basketball school again, but again, I'm probably leaving out some schools here, but these are the ones that initially jump out. You
Well,
know,
let's
do I
ask a
have
few
Clemson?
questions
I
about
didn't
those.
get
So,
Clemson wrong. Sure.
so
Mhm.
you have in the top two groups, it looks like you have 19. And then in the next tier, you have 4, 8. So roughly you have 28, 27, 28 schools. I don't count the sport specific schools because
Yeah,
one, you have to win a national championship to be considered, and two, you have to have more than one sport. Not one of those schools has won a national championship in both football and basketball. So,
yeah.
if we take those and set them aside, you take the next year, you add it with the newer money NIL schools, that
Mhm.
28 to 30, you're pretty comfortable with where you've got them ranked. And then how comfortable are you then with the next maybe 10 or 15?
Yeah, and that's where, you know, what's going to happen over the next decade as there's this positioning before the next media contracts, as possible the next round of realignment in 2031, or in the couple of years leading up to that, as
Right.
schools get out of the ACC. We've got our three top level ACC schools here, all here on the borderline, that's probably the not the right. I probably should have switched the next tier and the borderline here. I think I actually have the wrong headers there. I
Oh,
think
okay.
these schools are, yeah. Let me switch that in real time here.
Yeah, go
Um,
ahead. Get it
Sorry
the way
about
you
that.
want it.
Yep. Again, this is not super professional.
That's all
Getting
right.
the
That's good.
graphics. I'm more about the data than the wonderful graphics, but
I
I
think
try
it's
to
turned out
definitely work
great.
on the good.
Okay. So keep going.
And again, I think we could add more schools to the borderline group here. If we're having UCLA in there, could we add Louisville? Could we add Kansas? Again, more basketball schools. Could we add Kentucky? They're in the SEC. They have lots of money, but have again never really proven that they are super committed to football, both with their
Right.
coaches and just how much focus on basketball.
What do you Go
Big
ahead.
12,
Sorry,
other
go
Big
ahead.
12 schools. I know there's, can the Arizona schools, can Colorado, can BYU, can they be up there? Yeah, if the boosters are there, I'm leaving out Utah just because they're they've been losing some players
Yeah, let me
supposedly to
let me cut
bigger
you off there,
NIL
Jeff, because
contracts.
that's actually what got me started on this. 2 years ago, I had the thought that basketball, Utah, for those that don't know, used to have one of the best basketball programs in the country. Utah was synonymous with making it into the big dance. They were synonymous with getting very deep into the tournament. And then what happens? They decide they want to join the Pac 12. To do that, they need to stay relevant in one or two sports, and they chose to do it in football. Football was their ticket in. That's the one that gets the most publicity. It's the one that draws the most money and draws the most eyeballs, and they were very successful at it. They won the Pac 12 back to back years. Now basketball is back in the front burner for the University of Utah. How hard will it be for them to now starting all over in their basketball program to get back up to where they would like to be competing for championships in both sports.
Whew, yeah, that's a big question because again, they've become a football school, and you talked to Wild Ute, and he does not like the idea of Brett Yormark even focusing the Big 12 on being a basketball conference.
Right.
And I can agree with him there. You have to be relevant in football if you're going to have real media value, and so. Yeah, but on the other side of the coin, look at what the SEC's done. Greg Sankey, when he came in as commissioner, he pretty much, you know, laid down the law and said we need to commit more to basketball. We need to get better coaches. We need to get better recruits. We need to motivate our fan bases. We got great football fan bases. That's low hanging fruit. There's a lot of money to be had in our basketball games and arenas and ticket sales. This will be money well spent. Um, they just set a record for putting 14 teams in the tournament. I think most of us realize and how many teams went out in the first round sort of showed they probably were, some of those bubble teams maybe didn't quite deserve it as much as maybe some of the other bubble teams might have. But again, there's
Right.
no question that the SEC, was the best basketball conference this year, and they've been up in their game over the last 5 years since Sankey's taken the reins, and sort of this plan has played out. So you can do both, and that's sort of getting back to Utah. Can they do both, or is there more of a limited uh, NIL alumni funding base? Apparently, with their coach Smith, there were several donors that were willing to commit to basketball, but not with him as coach. And so I think partly with some of the lackluster performance, which honestly they didn't do horrible coming in a new conference that traditionally had been the best in the nation and is still likely
Right.
in the top, two to three, sort of tied with the Big Ten this year on a best conference behind the SEC, conferences behind the SEC. They actually did okay. I mean, they beat Kansas and Kansas State. They had some good wins, and a lot of people were sort of surprised that he was sort of kicked out when they were maybe on a little bit of an upswing in a new tough basketball conference. But a lot of people are like, well, what BYU's doing with bringing in Kevin Young and all the success and signing AJ DeMonsa and being in the top or tied for third in the Big 12 and making the Sweet 16, just all these things. Did that rally their donor base into saying we need to do that too? We can't be left behind. We've got to be relevant in basketball too. Um, and again, it's hard to discuss these things when the rivalries there, and we're two BYU fans talking about it without a Utah fan to give their perspective. But that a lot of people are saying this
Well, I
is
think
this is
I
sort
think
of
it's true.
copycat move.
Every Utah fan I've talked to recently in the last 2 years has said we're a football school, and they didn't care about basketball until the last 3 months. So it wasn't this was something
Yeah.
that was not it's not something you and I invented. It's been the case. The difference is you and I can both look forward and say BYU's now competing at the tip top of both football and basketball, and now Utah has to climb back on the basketball side. So, if you're a
Mhm.
program that isn't named BYU and you're leading that athletic department, how do you balance your spend? Because it's not very easy to stay up as a football focused school, and now all of a sudden to take some of that money and feed it into basketball to be successful.
Yeah, and that's going to be the interesting thing with BYU because I don't feel that Coach Satake, BYU's head football coach, has really embraced the totality of NIL and paying to bring in the top athletes, and maybe the money's hasn't been there. That's a little bit hard to believe from what people say is, all these donors that have the net worth of over $10 billion, and that there's a lot of money in BYU's dedicated athletic endowment, although the numbers aren't publicly available. Um, it's thought to be well over $100 million in that endowment, where that it doesn't seem, obviously there's plenty of money to bring in. They're saying BYU's, maybe the top NIL for basketball, definitely top five, and are new to the game, but they brought in AJ DeBonsa, and they're looks like they're going to fight for a couple of these great transfers. Maybe this Yaxel guy from UAB, or the Georgia point guard, or some people that are on the market. Are they going to, be able to bring Yegor back? Is he going to delay going in the draft? There's money
Right.
to be spent to have a Final Four caliber roster that can, make a run for a championship. BYU, I think a lot of fans are sick of hearing that we were the team that's made the tournament the most times without a Final Four appearance.
Right.
Tennessee has also never made the Final Four. I think they've got us beat on most Sweet 16s or Elite Eights with never making the Final Four, and they couldn't quite break through yet again. Actually, that game versus Houston wasn't close. That was over before it started, it seemed. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Does BYU football show the commitment? And there are rumors that some great things are coming. I've heard some excited anticipation of someone like a Ryder Lyons. A top. I think he's in the top two
Right.
QBs in this next class. Brock Harris is a elite, 5-star tight end who is going to be announcing his commitment within the week. And
Right.
will he choose BYU? The rumblings are that he will. Is this NIL money available for these athletes in football? And I think it's getting there. It's just more incremental with football. In basketball, we just seems like we went from 0 to 60 super fast, and the ramp up to getting the elite athlete just happened, just like that.
You have
Football's been a slower build, and we'll see how it
you have
goes.
105 players versus 12 players. It's a little bit easier to understand why it was easy to do in basketball, or easier certainly. And you and I could talk about this till I'm blue in the face, but in my opinion, the problem hasn't been the availability or not of basketball money. Sorry, football money. It's been, we can spend it in defense, but our offensive coordinator can't recruit the best quarterback from each class. We've been, it seems to me, fighting for classes ahead, a 26 or a 27 player, and not somebody that was a 24 or a 25. But you know what? At the end of the day, in football, it takes more than just one player to win. And I think that's what BYU is doing. If you were to look at it from a strategy standpoint, I don't think it's a willingness to spend money, or not having the money to spend. It's, you have to get the right players in football.
Yeah, and in basketball, I mean, we've always noticed this. You have two or three of the right players that are just playing amazing, and have that talent, and they play both ways. They play offense and
Right.
defense, and
Right.
a couple elite players can really be game changers in basketball, where that doesn't really happen in football. Even if you have an elite QB, someone's got to
Right.
block for him, someone's got to catch his passes, and you got to have a defense that can stop other good teams. This next thing is looking at your total. And so this first column, sorry to switch gears on you here,
No,
but
please
this,
go.
this
I'm
may
working for you.
bring in a few other schools. Again, this is from Sportico, that the USA Today Sportico, the Knight Commission data of the reporting, and this is looking at total athletics dedicated endowment, and these are what the schools have reported are in their current. This is the most recent reporting. What's in their athletic dedicated endowment? So these are donations that people have specified. I want my $10 million to go to sports, and put it in the endowment and let it be
Okay.
there to support, bringing in the best coaches and athletes, and making sure our students get the scholarship money they need. Look at number 2 and number 3 on this list: California and
Wow.
Virginia. So
Wow.
they've got the money in their endowments. But I also put this other column here, this third column, current outstanding athletics debt, to sort of put it in
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
So, California has a lot of money there, but is that parlayed? Is that sort of there to help offset their how much money they actually owe, whether
Right.
it's the university system or and a lot of these big athletic debts are from capital projects, stadium rebuilds and other facility upgrades. Um, but you look at a school like and this fourth column here is looking at your endowment minus your debt, and it's they're not necessarily completely related, but maybe it gives a better perspective on who has healthier athletic balance books. But
Right.
again, Virginia comes out pretty good in there. Look at Kansas here. Kansas is sixth here, and again, I probably should have included them on the borderline, and Georgia Tech, just from these numbers alone, how much money they have in their athletics dedicated endowment. That's
Right.
they've kept their powder dry, and can spend at that level. I didn't put Wisconsin in there. They're probably on that borderline level as well, and they traditionally been good in both sports. It's been down a little the last few years, but even schools like Alabama here, they don't. They have more debt than athletics dedicated endowment. And again, different schools do this differently. Some schools, they get the money in and they feel like they're going to spend it, they're going to use it, they're going to stay relevant now. What good is it holding it? Let's be relevant now. Let's build the brand.
Right.
But even a school like Rutgers here, which was in I think the bottom 10 of the NIL things we looked at before, they're in the top 25 in total athletics endowment. You can even go here. Again, this is just public schools. Schools like LSU here comes out at 34th, and some of these get really small really quickly. Not a lot of schools really commit to this athletics dedicated endowment. Again, BYU's is rumored to be in the 100 to 150 million range. So does that put them top 10? Again, rumors just, and
Yeah.
I, yeah, there may be more than that. There may be less. This is the FBS average here at 31 of 44 million here. But again, look at, Kansas State, Arizona State, a lot of Big 12 schools, even some non-power schools, East Carolina's here, Miami, Ohio. And again, I don't know why the colors came out weird like this. I apologize on that one. But Oklahoma is relatively low, near 30. Um, and just because I'm a BYU fan, I always want to see where Utah is, very little in athletics dedicated endowment, behind a
Yeah.
lot of, conferences. So this is not where they're putting their money into a dedicated. So so they need to raise a lot more money if these figures are correct to to bring in the coaches to bring to have money to fund
Just
top
for
level NIL. So
operations.
that's why I'm a little hesitant to put Utah even on the borderline of being able to spend at the level to be top tier talent in basketball and football. So
So as we start to wind this down, and I'm going to invite anybody, if you want your question to be asked to Jeff, I've already had him for over an hour, so make it a super chat now. Otherwise, we probably won't get to it. But I invite everybody to follow Jeff Fuller on Twitter. Let me drop this banner so everybody can see Jeff's contact information. So it's at JJ Fuller 72 is where you can find him on Twitter. As we start to wind this down, Jeff, I think the biggest question that everybody's going to ask, and obviously, we go coast to coast. We have everybody in every walk of life in every conference. People watch our shows. What is the one thing you would give guidance to people that are caring about what their school is and what they can possibly provide to be successful? What is the thing that you would tell everybody to watch for a particular number to spend, or a particular thing that they should be putting their money into to source? What is the one thing that you would tell people to pay attention to when referencing their school's economics and paying for things that all go into to having top tier sports.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to come up with what the magic number is going to be, but you know, there was a while there, I think, before, not to get political, but before the administration changes, that half the
Right.
money was going to have to go to women, support women's sports, and then the new administration came in and said that's different,
The
and
Title
it can
IX you're
go.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, the Title IX, and does that
Yeah.
apply, not just to equal access and equal representation, but does that apply to equal outcomes?
Right.
But I think you know most people realize that the money should be spent out based on where it comes in, and again, that's mostly football and basketball. Um, if you're if you have the capability to donate and support your NIL, that's something that can really support these athletes and can really keep your teams relevant. There's a lot of frustration too on the backside of that. You got a lot of Kansas State fans right now with basketball. They spent a lot of money in the portal to
They
build that
did.
roster, and between just the pieces not fitting and or injuries or coaching conflicts, it didn't really pan out. So there's, uh, can you be can you be bitten? Will you become bitter? If we're smaller donors and just putting in a little bit each little bit like I do, I'm more committed for the long term. I'm not saying here's $3 million, go get a better quarterback.
Right.
What happened at Florida State with DJ Ungalale. They spent a lot of money to bring him in there, and they see Miami spends a lot of money to get Cam Ward there, and boy,
Yeah.
what a night and day difference. Even though those were both supposed to be great quarterbacks, so it, you know, if money's no object for a lot of these donors, then they want to be relevant, they want to spend, but for most of us, support it as you can. I understand a lot of people saying, this is not what I signed up for. I'm older school. I'm not enamored with the idea of players getting paid so much at this level. They're getting free educations. I definitely don't align with that, but I can understand why some people may feel a little bitter about the direction of college athletics and how it's so much dependent on money. But I will, you know, spending money on recruiting and bringing in good recruits has proven time and time again in football to allow access to the highest level and to get national championships. So yes, you need good coaching. You need players that can that can maybe go higher than their recruiting ranking. BYU's always been good at that, about getting more out of their athletes than maybe their recruiting ranking shows. But recruiting and coaching are vital, and you got to have money to play in both basketball and football.
Absolutely certain. I appreciate you coming on tonight. Why don't you tell everybody where to find your stuff and kind of what might be your next project? I would ask you to maybe publish your top 40 brands that you think on Twitter you'd like to. If we were to say name your 40 schools that you think could fully fund both
Yeah,
basketball and football, that would be sure fun to see if people would follow you on Twitter.
yeah. I mean, boy, that wouldn't be controversial at all, would it? But yeah, I'll definitely get something worked up there. Um,
Hey,
but I
we're
mean,
in the
I know part
opinion
of it is
game,
just
Jeff. We're in the
engagement.
opinion game.
Yeah, I know engagement and clickbait and all that. I've been accused of plenty of those things. But yeah, I do occasionally write for the ESPN 960. That's BYU uh, radio channel out in Utah. That follows Cougar Sports with Ben Criddle. He does a radio show out there. I'm on his show frequently, and have published several things there. I've got something worked up showing that BYU is the number one team in both basketball and football have finished ranked in the AP top 25 more times than they've started there, than any
Wow.
other team
Okay.
in both sports. So sort of interesting that just voters just don't give BYU preseason credit in either sport traditionally. I think that's going to change this year. BYU is going to should start ranked in both sports, but historically, no other team has ended ranked more often than it started ranked than BYU. I've got something written up on there that I just have to put the finishing touches on. But yeah, JJ Fuller 72 on Twitter. Just follow me there. That's where most of the content comes from. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on and to discuss these interesting topics on college football and college sports.
Well, I appreciate you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Say hi to your family for me, and make sure everybody follow him on Twitter and engage with him. He certainly answers questions, direct questions, as long as they're not hateful speech or anything like that. He will engage with requests. He does special projects like he did tonight for me. And if you have a good topic or question, make sure you run it by him, and he'll try to do everything he can to get you the answer that you might be searching for. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. And thank everybody else for being here tonight. Tomorrow night, I Talk SEC will be here. And yes, we will be talking SEC on the College Football Mafia Network. That would be tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And do you have anything else, Jeff, you want to add tonight?
No, just appreciate the opportunity. Always love talking with you, and love college sports. Love my Cougars, and excited for what the future holds.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Jeff. Thank you so much. And your takeaway homework is 40 teams, the best 40 teams that can compete in both top tier football and basketball.
All
Due
right,
by
I'll
Friday
take
at
the
the
assignment.
end of class.
Yeah,
Okay.
whatever.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Okay, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
We'll see
Everybody
you.
else have a great night. Stay out of trouble. We will see you tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And obviously, follow me on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you turn on your notifications on both. And if you're on X, do me a favor, jump over on YouTube and subscribe. That would help me quite a bit. We're trying to push to that 5,000 subs, and that'll help us get there. I appreciate everybody else. Have a great night. Stay out of trouble, and peace be with you. See ya. Bye-bye.